Local taxi businesses are often the unsung heroes of urban mobility, and which is why we need to celebrate them. And today we have with us Parth Krishna, the CEO of Maxride, one of the fastest growing taxi businesses in Southeast Asia. We're also joined by Samar Singla, CEO and founder of Jugnoo Mobility as a Service platform and the techs behind Maxride. Hi, hello, welcome both of you. How's it going?
Hello, Taira. Hey, Parth. Thanks
Hi,
for
hi,
joining
Sana.
this.
Hi. Thank you, Sana. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so thank you for joining us. And Parth, starting with you, Max Ride's model is really fascinating. You've not just built a successful taxi business, but also enabled drivers to hit the roads by helping them get their own Bajaj three-wheelers. So what I want to ask is, was that the basic idea or did it evolve with time?
So let me give a little bit of a background on what is Maxride and what are the objectives of Maxride. Maxride was founded a year and a half in November of 2023 using a different SaaS or a different technology provider um, um, with with the goal of reintroducing the classic Bajaj three-wheeler to Indonesia. So Maxride or our company is a sister concern of our core and traditional business, which is we are a distributor of Bajaj Auto Limited. Bajaj Auto is, as most of you would know, the world's largest manufacturer of three-wheelers, controlling 90% of the global market, and is present in about 60 countries. Vipar Auto, the shareholder of Bajaj Auto, represents Vipar Auto, the distributor of Bajaj Auto. Sorry, the distributor of Bajaj Auto represents Bajaj in about 13 countries, all of which have a very unique business model in their own right. However, the common underlying factor is that we are a taxi seller, I would call it. So if we take the example of Cambodia, we are we hold 90% market share of the three-wheeler market. Three-wheelers form the backbone of the Cambodian public transport system. There are no motorcycle taxis, there are hardly any car taxis, there is little or no public transport, and three-wheelers go and solve that use case. In Myanmar, the story is very similar, where Vipar Auto holds through our subsidiary Precision Auto Engineering, and through in Cambodia our subsidiary Hanuman Auto Trading, we hold 90% of these three-wheeler markets. So these markets can be quite large. The Myanmar will have a sales volume of north of 1,000 units, and Cambodia has seen peaks of selling about 2,000 units, as high as 2,000 units a month. Indonesia has had Bajaj three-wheelers as part of their transportation ecosystem for the past few decades. However, over the past decade or so, the three-wheeler community, including the previous distributor of Bajaj Auto Limited, was slow to adopt technology. So the the revolution that took place in the taxi industry was over the past decade or decade and a half by now was ride hailing, starting with companies like, I mean, the poster child of it all being Uber, right? So what happened was when Grab, Gojek entered Indonesia, they displaced Bajaj three-wheelers as being part of that transportation ecosystem. They effectively transferred large amounts of demand onto motorcycles and private cars, while three-wheelers were either onboarded or not onboarded in their entirety. However, this was not I would say it was, in Hindi we have a saying, "Tali do haath se bajti hai." So I would by saying that there was no marriage between the three-wheeler community and the ride-hailing apps, of which there are a few in Indonesia. Indonesia tends to be a crowded market with Grab, Gojek, Maxim, InDrive, and a gamut of other applications running in the market. So one of the world's most highly competitive
Okay.
ride-hailing markets is Indonesia. what we have noticed globally, that ride hailing adoption is growing even today, even though the, I would say, the buzz behind it is slowly starting to fade as the novelty of the product is fading. But their underlying growth continues, adoption continues, and the taxi driver, taxi owner, and that transportation ecosystem has realized that this is a must have. So, as a large seller of taxis, Vipar Auto decided to start Maxride in order to start and reinvigorate with the business of Bajaj in Cambodia. We're a very firm believer that every three-wheeler sold is an employment opportunity gained. So it had to be win-win, where we provide a decent living for our drivers, as well as create the demand for these three-wheelers, right? So that was the genesis of Max, right? And now, slowly, very slowly, with a lot of pain, having changed multiple technology vendors, having learned along the way, by hook or by crook, we've arrived at something like doing 10,000 rides a day, and we are present in 3 cities of Indonesia. As Vipar Auto grows or introduces newer products into its target markets, which are Myanmar, Cambodia, Indonesia, Angola, Mozambique, Ethiopia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, where we are the distributors of Bajaj, we will have Maxride as a provider of income to our drivers so that they get a fair deal from the market.
So,
Wow.
just to add to that part, I'm in Poland right now, and we have like a taxi customer here. He asked me, can we get tuk-tuks here? Because he knows that we run tuk-tuks in India. And I said, okay, but why are you interested? He said that it's a very good segment in between bike and cars and taxis, basically.
That is
So,
exactly, Samar. That would be the exact hypothesis that why even today, after
yeah,
Bajaj's last distributor in Indonesia exited the country. Bajaj
mm,
shut its subsidiary in Indonesia in 2010. Okay, because they had
mm,
large
no
growth in other
demand.
parts. No, they had large growth in other parts of the world. It was not a
Yeah.
priority for Bajaj at that point. For whatever reason, they moved out of the subsidiary. A
Mm,
local distributor was appointed, who probably did not do justice to it. But
yeah.
despite that, despite not being impaneled on a single ride-hailing platform, despite all the pressures from Grab and Gojek and the billions of dollars poured, the Bajaj three-wheeler even today in the city of Jakarta tends to do a lot of the heavy lifting of the public transport. And the government and the Indonesian public realize that this is a vehicle that is affordable. It can do rides during the rain. It slots
Yeah.
right between a car and a motorcycle, and it's significantly safer than a motorcycle. So in
Yeah.
Indonesia, we have cars that are expensive, um, and tend to be not viable for short rides.
Mm,
And then you have motorcycles, which are very good at navigating the traffic of Jakarta. They're very good at navigating the traffic of any of our large metropolises. And we can see that through the success of companies in India like Rapido,
mm,
that how they're growing this bike segment. At the same time, the Indian auto rickshaw market is only growing. I
yeah.
mean, whether it's an E three-wheeler or a Bajaj three-wheeler or a Piaggio, that category has only expanded
Yeah.
throughout
Yeah. Yeah. In
the
the last,
time.
in fact,
Yeah.
wherever I go, like I went to
Mm,
Morocco, right?
mm,
And a lot
mm,
of places, legally there are challenges. Like the government is trying to phase out tricycle vehicles kind of thing, right? But the customer demand is actually increasing because it's a perfect niche between the bike and the taxi, where it's much cheaper than it's almost bike pricing and much more
yeah,
convenient. And
the asset on its own, and I keep telling my people, when you price a ride, Okay, the
Hmm.
asset depreciated over 5 years. Let's say a Bajaj three-wheeler costs 3,000. I'll roughly make the numbers up, 3,000 USD,
Hmm.
right? To depreciate that over 5 years, all right, roughly 72, I mean, pardon my mathematics, 60 months, you're looking at $50 a month
Yeah.
in
Nothing.
depreciation, which is the
Nothing.
largest component of the
Hmm.
pricing of the ride the
Is the
person
depreciation.
is the person riding the three-wheeler,
Yeah.
not really the asset. Now, if you can double the productivity of that person versus motorcycles, you can carry three with, I mean, look at your net monthly running costs. If you run a motorcycle, let's assume you paid your driver a salary of, I don't know, in Indonesia, you pay them $250 or the minimum wage offered by the government, a fair wage. A lot of these drivers, because of the existing applications, today you'll find news articles they don't even earn the minimum wage. Okay, and there's a lot of pushback against ride-hailing firms that the drivers are not earning enough. So if you look at if that mathematics, it's $250 in driver salary, $50 in vehicle cost. If you just apply depreciation without
Hmm.
having a
Yeah.
loan shark, without actually having a loan shark in the middle, right?
Even then,
Because
it's $100, right? I mean,
even then,
let's
if you
assume
take it
that.
as $100, it is a, and then the fuel, right? The
Yeah.
vehicle cost is not the matter. It is the ability of a three-wheeler to expand productivity of the driver, and
Yeah.
hence it is providing if I take a motorcycle fare, and you carry two people on it or three people on it, it cannot compete with a three-wheeler. The
Yeah.
cost per person the cost for transporting a person is unbeatable with three-wheelers, and that is for sure. And that
And I
mathematics,
think,
however we run the Excel file, it doesn't change.
yeah. And what do you think about electric? Like, I feel that it's only going to accelerate once electric adoption in three-wheelers comes in.
So I tend I tend to be an optimist and a skeptic. Given the time frame you tell me about,
Yeah.
if you tell me in the next 5 years, I would tend to be the skeptic. If you
Hmm.
told me in the next 20 years, I tend to be the optimist.
Yeah.
Right.
Makes
So,
sense.
right. So, if you told me, if you told me, for example, the usage of CNG in India,
Hmm.
right? There is no comparison to that being when you take the cost of how CNG is priced in India at 20 to 30 rupees a kg. This three-wheeler
Yeah.
delivers 30, 40 kilometers per kg. You're looking at 1 rupee a kilometer as
Hmm.
cost of fuel. So
We
I
we
would.
are actually we are
Mm,
actually setting up a CNG plant in Punjab.
mm,
I invested in a company out of Denmark which does
mm,
designs and builds CNG plants. The
mm.
economics is amazing. It's actually much better than a solar plant, and it's renewable, and it solves the waste issue which India is a huge problem in. And yeah, so
Exactly
it's
right. So,
gen
like for example, so you have to put electric vehicles in their own category. All right. Electric vehicles, to me, in the very short run, really depend upon the infrastructure, the provision of other alternate fuels that markets tend to overlook, LPG, CNG, and the likes. You also have to look at charging infrastructure. You have to look at the cost of a battery, right? For example, the
yeah.
Bajaj three-wheeler uses a 9 kilowatt battery, and that takes the cost of a three-wheeler's ROI. I mean, doubles or triples the cost of a three-wheeler. You look at cost of entry into the product for a customer, how viable are the loans there, so on and so forth. So depends how you run the Excel sheet, depending on the cost of energy. If you're going to, India has a very low cost of electricity, right? The government's done a
Yeah.
fabulous job, delivering that infrastructure in there. We have distribution problems, but actually the just generation in India is three,
Is
four
pretty
rupees.
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's 3, 4 rupees a kilo and a kilowatt hour. So I mean, or even 2.5. I don't know the current. I probably know the data from
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years ago.
Right now, in
Yeah.
fact,
Mhm.
like the government is able to buy at about 2.5 rupees from private sector, which is like
Exactly,
fantastic. Yeah.
which in many parts of the world doesn't happen. Right? We deal in international markets. In Cambodia, that's 12 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're looking at 8 rupees a kilowatt hour to the customer. Right? So 8 to 9
Yeah.
rupees. At that point, electric vehicles tend to be difficult to adopt,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you need a government subsidy, you need the route to market of the electric vehicle to be absolutely, it requires a regulatory push. Now, for example, in Indonesia, petrol is 11,000 Indonesian rupiah, but the petrol light is
Yeah.
11,000 Indonesian rupiah a liter. Now we're talking about 60 rupees or 60 rupees a liter of petrol. It changes the economics of electric. Whereas India,
Yeah.
with a liter of petrol being nearly 100, I don't know. I mean, you'd
Yeah.
probably a
100.
buyer.
Yeah.
You're probably a buyer of petrol. I'm not a buyer of petrol, right? So I don't own a car, so I'm an anti-car. So
Okay.
yeah, so I don't believe in cars, right? So um, I would kind of be like, what is at 100 rupees and the 2.5 kilowatt, the ROI on an electric three wheeler is viable. So you really
Yeah.
have to look at it case to case, case to case. In India, the ROI is viable. I do it in Cambodia. The ROI for the guy to get his battery, the investment in his battery back is 5 years. And I look at the battery and it's dead in 7 years. So why would a customer take that risk to earn 5 to 10% more? No, he like the flexibility of a internal combustion engine,
No, fair.
right? And
Totally
so
agreed.
yeah. So we have to really go case by case, go into in that
Economics.
matter.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes
The
sense. And that's
economics
okay.
really
You know,
matter.
it grows slowly. Yeah.
And in some places in the world, it just won't make sense. It
Yeah.
really just won't make sense, right? So if you look at, Bajaj three wheelers sell into the interiors of Ethiopia, right? They sell into the interiors of Cambodia, into the
Yeah.
interiors of Myanmar. Well, how are we gonna? And the average ride is 100 kilometers, for example, in some parts of Myanmar. They connect cities, these three wheelers. So
Yeah.
there, the driver really needs that flexibility
Yeah.
and
And
availability
you
of
know, some
electricity.
places, in a lot of places, electricity is generated by coal, most of it. What's the point? In fact, in Poland right now, where I'm sitting, I
Hmm.
asked, like, you know, do you have a nuclear power plant? It's a big debate because they shut down all the nuclear power plants and shifted to coal about 15 years ago. It's so stupid to me, at least. You know, I don't know the big arguments, but if you're
Exactly. You're
mm,
swapping at the end of the day. You're swapping one energy source for another. It's all energy. We all know. I mean,
yeah,
you're an engineering guy, right? So you know that you're every time you transform one form of energy, there's
yeah, yeah, it
a loss and so on and so forth. There's always that transmission loss
doesn't
and
make
so on
sense.
and so forth. So people really electric to me is a people need to understand their use cases. People need to understand their economics and take a wise decision on the same,
Yeah, makes sense.
rather than certain governments across the world just going and saying, uh, because
Yeah,
it sounds,
let economics
let the
run its
economics of
course,
the
and I
market,
think,
yeah,
yeah,
that private companies and economics of the market dictate the world rather than we
exactly,
ourselves getting involved in all these ESG funds and all of that. I would strongly argue that most of these ESG funds are actually anti ESG if you look into their holdings.
makes sense. Yeah,
Right? We're talking about saving energy, but we're running. People have the world has gotten in the American. The American stock market boom has led
mm,
us, and in a select maybe 20 companies has led us to think technology is the solution to everything rather than just simple plain common sense. Right. So
no,
without,
totally agreed. Yeah,
I would have loved to see what the future of electric was had Elon Musk not been there. His largest
and I mean,
contribution
right
is
now, if you see, you know, right now, like
mm,
hybrid is the flavor of the day, and because people want that flexibility, as you said, and
mm,
you know, I read a Toyota study that
mm.
you can make about five hybrid cars, plug-in hybrids, same amount of lithium as one total EV. So I think, you know, but yeah, anything. I
Well,
guess we digress. Why
yeah,
don't
we
you know,
completely
Tyra?
digress. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
Tyra, why don't you take us
Mhm.
back? Sorry.
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Taking you guys back, I think technology is the real fuel over here. So, talking about Maxride backend, Path, what made you choose to go for your own custom stack rather than just listing on a third party platform?
So I don't call us a custom stack. We're largely dependent on on Jugnoo. A custom stack would be something for us. Of course, we're working with Jugnoo to have various customizations on top of the Jugnoo platform. We are not developing anything. If I count my tech team members, I have two. Okay. I don't think I can develop two. I don't have an Android developer. I do not have an Apple developer. I do not have any, other than a guy who works on SQL on a database for me, and a guy who does a bit of marketing and all that. We don't do that. We like to outsource that. We like to provide the business requirement document to the developer and move on from that. Why list on? What do you mean by list on a third-party platform? We'd like to probably explain that to me.
Because your primary business is selling autos, why not just grab and stuff? Why build these rides yourself?
So again, right, goes back somewhat to the fact that um, does Grab want me, right?
Yeah.
And it goes back to the point like where to start. We're creating a new niche. These large platforms um, have millions of have users. They have tons of demand. Grab is a top line company doing, I don't know, I don't even bother to look at that annual report by now. Probably maybe a million rides now or something crazy like that. Till we don't hit a certain critical mass, we probably won't not be impaneled on the larger ride hailing apps. However, where we are a significant critical mass in countries like Cambodia and Myanmar, we do list our three wheelers on Grab because at the end of the day, a person has bought a three wheeler from me. They are free to list it where they want. It's their property. Tomorrow,
Of course.
right. So what we are doing with Maxride is a revenue enhancer for our customers. It is not
Makes sense.
competition to the large listed ride hailing players of Southeast Asia. We are not Grab's competition. We are not GoTo's competition. We will be nimble around them. We will deliver our drivers customers. And for that, we have to compete in a marketplace. I'm not going to be afraid of competing with Grab because I value my driver. I must compete with Grab for my driver. That would be the
Yeah,
basic bottom line of the situation.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, Samar, why do you think, okay, like local companies or companies, entrepreneurs that run taxi businesses, why is it important for them to have their own tech stack?
See, I'll tell you what, right? My here's my thesis. That Uber has spent way too much money than they should have, right? To build this market. They burnt like maybe $10 billion in capital over the years. And now they have that pricing pressure to recoup that money to justify that valuation. You know, so they charge about 30% from the drivers. That's the real problem. That's the real issue, that all the platforms, all the large monopolies that they have created are charging roughly around 30% from the driver. And one, is it fair? I don't think so. You may say that it's capitalism, but that's exactly why we are saying, okay, we'll actually undercut them. And wherever I go, right, I'm right now in Poland, I'm going next to Mexico, right? This is my daily thing, right? I go there, I talk to the local drivers. One single trend that is working out is that almost every local player is profitable now because Uber has started charging 30% from their drivers. Not just Uber, I don't know exactly what Grab charges, but I'm sure it's not though. So what is happening is every driver now wants to actually make more money. That's why they like the local player. And my thinking is that every local champion is going to be a winner, right? In every single market, be it Indonesia, be it, and, it's not possible for somebody sitting in San Francisco or Singapore to tell how a small city in Indonesia or Poland or Mexico would be run, because the laws are different, the preferences are different. Just imagine the company I'm working with, maybe we'll do the next video. I can't announce their name yet, but 80% of their rides come on phone. Can you imagine this? Like, like they have 50 people sitting and doing like a call center thing. and like we're figuring out how to enhance their experiences. But the point is that people are very, very different in all the parts of the world, and we have to learn that only a local player would be able to do it. Can I understand Indonesia better than Parth? Never. Can Uber understand Indonesia better than Parth? Never. So I think that's
No,
the
no, no. I
reality.
would. So the only point therein would be Indonesia would be that it is a core large market for most of these players.
Hmm.
Grab's, I mean, largest market would be Indonesia. Their largest city would be Jakarta, right?
Hmm.
So on and so forth. So the metrics between a Poland and an Indonesia, you look in a country of 30 million people was a country of 400 million people. So the
Yeah.
metrics would be very, very different. It would be kind of like having a Rapido in India who has taken on
Yeah.
the, let's say, the Ubers of India and the Olas and succeeded. That would be the kind of like the benchmark to the whole matter. But I buy what someone is saying. There is a company in Cambodia called Pass App, and they give a grab a run for their money on my product. They were the
Yeah.
innovator. They started very similar with a SaaS solution, with the kind of solution that is Jugnoo, right? With one of Jugnoo's competitors, right? And they did fantastically well. The guy is now sitting on a cash cow and with very little investment. So what Samar is doing is absolutely right in the smaller markets of the world. The larger markets of the world require a slightly different strategy. If you're going to go to the US and you're going to compete with Uber, you would have in its home market would be tough. Grab's home market is Indonesia, so Vipar differentiates using three wheeler. There we go. We
True.
can sum it up in that way.
Yeah, so that's how you solve this challenge of facing the big players.
And we are very happy to partner with them as well, right? We are setting up an ecosystem for the drivers, right? Tomorrow we are going to set up an ecosystem in Angola for the drivers, where there are no three wheelers, where we're going to seed the product, right? And we're going to use the technology platform provided by Samar and his company to do that, right? We have a global partnership with Jugnoo where I've told them I'm going to take them from country to country to country to country, small or large. That's beyond the question. So of course it is just again, right, like we talked about electric, uh, a bit of common sense applied to the matter, right? And finding your space in the world without having an overarching vision is much better in being than having that and not having that. But of course, in a country like Poland, for sure, right? The price of a ride is very expensive. Um, and for a driver to pay $5 for customer sourcing or $6 for customer sourcing if he's doing a 20 euro ride is obnoxious, right? But in
Yeah, and
Indonesia,
yesterday I took a ride from one
Mm,
city to another, and
mm.
about $100 ride uh, on Uber, and it costed me on this local taxi about $65. So I think that's the difference, right? And because Uber is charging 30%, and these guys, local guys, charge a flat fee for a month. And I think that's the trend in the whole world, and it is showing already. It's market segment. You see, yesterday somebody had posted on LinkedIn that earlier it was $3 rides in New York, then they became $25 rides in New York. Now they are $100 rides. Now hailing a taxi, road taxi in New York is cheaper than an Uber or a Lyft. And honestly,
Same
I
things are
mean,
happening. The same things happening in Singapore, Southeast Asia.
at
Same things happening everywhere.
at risk of sounding stupid, our next game plan is to go to these big cities, London, New York, Singapore, and take Uber head on. We'll still work with a local partner, but there are enough stupid people in the world to take on the big guys gladly. I mean,
Uh,
I'm one of them. I love being
I
the
want.
guy.
I would not take on, right. Someone we should avoid words because I've never said I will take on someone in business. Competition is a zero sum game. Nobody wins. I mean, if we are to
Yeah,
learn from their mistakes, right? They competed with each other and they never realized that finding your own niche, building your
that's
own
true.
business, The competition is a zero sum game. I hate any business that's very competitive. I know my margin. It's the simple economics we study in grade 11, grade 12, right? Perfectly competitive businesses have zero margin, right? So what we learned in simple is that, find your own niche, right? That may be, and provide that. There will be a value to an Uber, there will be a value to a Grab, so on and so forth. But smaller players have their own niche as well, right? A local taxi company may not want that. A driver, Uber works in a model where he forces the driver to work 10 to a minimum of 20 rides a day, otherwise the driver's not breaking even. They
Yeah.
incentivize drivers to do more, to do much more than what they may be comfortable doing, because they can't earn. They want their drivers to do a lot of work, right? Whereas they may have
Yeah.
some drivers, whereas a local taxi driver may just want to work 8 hours and earn his 8 hours and pay only that much and not care about the Uber bonuses, or what there are bonuses for high performance drivers, so on and so forth, high fulfillment rates, and really in that kind of way. So in a very large, I don't know how many billion taxis or million taxis or whatever the number there are in the world, certainly there is a space for everyone.
No, no, totally agreed.
Mm,
And see,
mm,
when I say take on, I don't mean in a head-on competition thing, but I
mm.
actually believe that niches are there to be captured by smaller players. And that, see, there are people who say, I don't care, I just want the fastest ride. Uber, Grab is probably always going to be the best for them, right? But then there are players who will say, "Oh, I want the cheapest, I don't care how long I have to wait." Local player is always the best for them. So there are these niches that come, and for customer, I think if they get choices, that's the best option. But
Of
yeah, I
course,
think yeah,
of course, and there is where we there is where we go and
yeah,
make a difference,
bridge that gap.
in this entire transportation ecosystem, which really today starts with a bicycle and goes all the way to a aircraft. I mean, that is the real gamut of ride hailing, right? There, I've seen apps today where you can book a private jet, for example. I'm sure you're doing that right now in Poland. So
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. So I mean, the whole
yeah,
thing exists in that way.
makes
So
sense.
there's
So yeah,
place for everybody in the mobility scene, while we are more on the local players side, and uh, but we will see what happens in the future. But what do you think, Samar? Will more local players dominate all over the world?
well, as I feel, right now the domination is not happening, but they are profitable, right? So if I talk about 3 years ago, they were all struggling to stay alive, right? And today, every niche local player is actually doing very well. They are profitable, they are growing, right? And yes, the technology is a big gap, because if you start, like if every small local player started building their own technology, it's very, very expensive. So I think that is a gap. And then infrastructure in the terms of, the legal issues are quite a bit. So, what has happened is in the last 5 to 10 years, this segment has been regulated quite a bit. And the regulation has been a little more skewed towards larger players, sadly. Because, the government has said, okay, you guys are creating a monopoly, so let me tax you accordingly, etc., which is fine. But then when the smaller player wants to enter a market, the entry point becomes very difficult. This is much more relevant in some Western developed countries than, let's say, you know Southeast Asia, Africa, because there I think the governments want more smaller players to succeed. So yeah, there are some challenges, but I already see that happen. I already see a lot of local players occupying small niches, growing. And I totally get it that what Parth is trying to do is to get auto rickshaws to a point, or tuk-tuks to a point where they are inevitable, like third leg, bikes, autos, taxis. Just totally makes sense. And at that point, they'll become mainstream, right? Now, will prediction, he will actually say in 5 years from now that, I will actually, just run it really aggressively and be a very big company. But At this point, that's not what they think, right? And
No,
that's the right way.
again, maybe I said it wrong, Samar. My point was, of course, you've summed it up really well. Our point is in Indonesia to make the three-wheeler relevant again. It is to develop it as the third leg of transport. Indonesia, a country that rains 6 months of the year. And as I said, right, when it rains, the entire motorcycle fleet goes off the roads. Everybody is into cars. Huge spikes happen. So I want to solve that problem case for 6 months of the year. The balance 6 months of the year, I'm saying I'm safer, so on and so forth.
Right. So thank you so much for joining us today, guys. We had a really intriguing conversation on what is happening in bigger markets and smaller markets and how local players can dominate and at least start by creating their own niche where bigger players are present.